Good evening. I'm Keith Ahearn, the Superintendent of Fairview Park City Schools, and thank you for joining us for our quarterly installment of the Superintendent Town Hall meetings. So today, Monday, March 24th, is our presentation here. I want to just jump right into the topics that we're going to discuss today. One of the big topics that we discussed on March 18th, we had a board meeting where I made a presentation to the board, and they had a first reading of Policy 661 on cell phone free schools. So many of you may or may not know that House Bill 250 was passed last year on May 15th of 2024. And what that bill requires is that by July 1st of 2025, school districts have a policy that restricts cell phone usage during school hours. In the latest biennium budget, it appears that that is going to be further modified. House Bill 250 will be further modified to say that the policy should include restrictions of cell phones by students from the beginning to the end of the school day. And that includes unstructured times at like lunches and study halls. There are some compelling statistics that make this policy not just a law, but also good educational practice. When you look at this slide, in the top left-hand corner, 97% of students, this is according to a Common Sense Media survey, 97% of students use cell phones during the school day on an average of 43 minutes per day, and they spend that time primarily on social media, YouTube, and gaming. If you look on the far right, you'll see that 50% of kids get 237 notifications per day. That's the average. You'll see down at the bottom of that, the right-hand side of the slide, that some students receive as many as 4,500 notifications every day. Again, that's based on a Common Sense Media survey. And then since 2010, in the center bottom of the screen, you'll see that the incidences of anxiety and depression, anxiety has gone up more than 134%, and depression has gone up by 106%. 2010 also marks the time the iPhone was introduced in 2008 and became widely available to students around 2010. So what are the benefits that we hope of a phone-free policy? There are many. We're hoping that by creating an environment that has fewer distractions, that students will be more focused at school. Less cyberbullying, because they'll have less opportunity to share negative things on social media during the school day. Fewer fights and social media-related conflicts. Increased engagement, improved attendance, more reading of books than scrolling on their devices. Improved teacher morale and retention. More social interactive lunchrooms. Less cheating and less reported stress by students. So the implementation of this policy, this all began with a presentation on March 18th to the Board of Education about it, the cell phone free policy that was put on for a first reading. Then the next day on the 19th, we sent an email communication to all parents and to all staff members, making them aware that policy 6.61 had received a first reading and that we would be talking about the implementation. March 21st, I met with both the certified staff members at Gillis Suite and at the high school, middle school, and talked about the implementation of this policy. Today, this town hall represents another opportunity to talk to our community about the implementation of this new policy. On April 1st, I'll be attending the Fairview High School, Mare Middle School PTA meeting, and also speaking to representatives of student council that day to talk about the implementation of this plan. March and April, you see the lion's share of that will be for our staff members to talk to students, communicate with them about the rules and procedures and the rationale and expectations that go along with the implementation of this process. And then finally, April 15th, pending board approval, the policy will be enacted, and then we would start with a cell phone free school policy after we return from spring break on Monday, April 28th. So what will this policy mean for students? In essence, it means that all cell phones and internet-connected devices should be off and away during the school day. And that includes unstructured times like lunches or study halls, Obviously, for privacy reasons, it includes restrooms, locker rooms, etc. And that emergency communication will happen in the ways that if there is an emergency, parents and guardians will receive either an email communication, a phone call, or a text message, and announcements or communications from staff members. So the enforcement of the policy, and again, we're still working on some of the details of how this looks, but in general, we have some consensus around the first offense would be confiscation of the device, and then the device would be returned from the school's main office at the end of the day to the student. A second offense would result in the confiscation of the device, but it would have to be picked up by a parent after school. The third offense, again, would result in confiscation of the device, but then the device would be picked up by a parent at the school offices and have a meeting with the principal or their designee. And then finally, repeated offenses would lead to progressive discipline. It would include detentions, in-school restrictions, and unfortunately, potentially maybe out-of-school suspensions. The goal of all of this is not to punish students, it's to create an environment where students can focus distraction-free on their learning. So what are the evaluations and next steps as we look to move into implementation? Obviously, through this town hall, through the staff meetings that I've had, through meetings that I will have with the public, through PTA meetings, and with students and student council, my goal is to collect feedback from all of our interested stakeholders on how we can implement this policy in the most consistent and fair manner. And then we'll look at ways over the next couple of months in the spring and to see whether we need to assess or refine any of the protocols and procedures that we have so that we can commit to ensuring that we have a strong rollout, not just this spring, but into the 2025-26 school year. So I want to roll through quickly some of the frequently asked questions that we prepared. You can find all of this information that's in my presentation. You can find the full presentation that I gave to the Board of Education on March 18th, and you can find all the frequently asked questions underneath the superintendent's page on our website. And you'll see all of the FAQs are expandable, so I'm not going to read all of these verbatim. But what does a cell phone-free school mean? It just means what we've said repeatedly here today, that cell phones and interconnected devices should be off and away during the school day so that students can focus on the important business of their learning. What if a student needs their phone for medical reasons? If a student has a serious medical condition that would require them to have access to their phone, those accommodations will be made through 504 and IEP plans. One of the things that I do say is generally the exemption for being able to carry a cell phone is related to a serious medical condition. For instance, diabetes that has to monitor glucose levels, or epilepsy. It is generally the only allowances are for serious medical conditions, and again that would be done through their plan, either a 504 or an IEP. How will parents communicate with students during the day? Again, parents can contact the main office for urgent messages to get to their child, and we have already had conversations about making sure that our phones are answered all day to ease and make this transition easier for parents that are concerned. What types of devices are included in this policy? The policy applies to all personal electronic devices, including smartphones, smart watches, tablets, earbuds, AirPods, and other communication devices that are used. If they are connected to a cell phone, they should be off and away during the school day. What if there's an emergency at the school? We've talked about this. In the event of an emergency, school staff will communicate directly with the students through the PA system. Classroom announcements will be done, teacher instructions, and then, as always, parents will be notified via school communication channels, whether it's a direct email, a text message, a voicemail communication, or in some cases for low-grade events, social media. Can parents opt their child out of the policy? The answer to that is no. This policy applies to all students to ensure the fairness and effectiveness of the policy. And if a parent has concerns, they should reach out to their school administrator and discuss possible accommodations, like we discussed earlier, for serious medical conditions. How will this policy be introduced and communicated to students, parents, and staff? We've talked about this quite a bit during the implementation piece, but it'll be through meetings like this to educate parents. It'll be meetings in person where I will have them. Principals are already working out the details to have either grade level conversations with students about the new policy and how it will be enforced, or during mentoring periods at the high school and middle school. What can parents do to support this initiative? Parents can help by discussing the importance of staying present at school and reinforcing the expectations of this cell phone free policy and ensuring that students understand why we're doing this. And why we're doing it is to create a distraction-free environment so that they can focus on school and not the distractions that cell phones bring. So this is an opportunity, and I'll pause at this for a second. If you're watching this and you have your phone and you want to scan that QR code, you can also go to our website, and this survey link and QR code are there as well, to submit feedback, questions, concerns that you may have about the cell phone policy. These will go directly into a spreadsheet that we are reviewing as we look at moving closer to April and the potential of this policy being implemented. The next item I want to jump into is an update from our October presentation where we had talked to you about a Bureau of Workers' Compensation grant that we had received of $40,000 for school safety and security to replace and upgrade the three exterior doors at Gillis Suite. Those doors, if you remember, were original to the building back in 2007 and needed to be replaced to enhance the functionality and the safety of the doors. We are pleased to report that as of February 28th, the door installation was complete. That's a picture of the brand new doors. They look great and function great. The doors are connected to our card reader system to allow access to only sanctioned adults, and they have laminated glass to add additional protection against potential breaching. So we are glad to finally have that grant completed. As you probably know, there are lots of lead time nowadays in ordering equipment that is customized. So having the back three doors at Gillis replaced in February was a huge accomplishment, and we're very happy to have that done and to have most of it completed through grant funding. The next item that you may or may not have heard is at the March 18th board meeting, the board approved the plans to replace the Gillis Suite playground. Gillis Suite playground has been there again since it was open in 2007, and much of the equipment at Gillis Suite actually was not new playground equipment even in 2007. It was equipment that was transferred from the Garnett School that was closed, and it was transferred to Gillis Suite. So much of the equipment at that place is past its usefulness. It is inspected every year and insured to make sure that it's safe for students, but there have been components of that playground that have had to be removed because they were unsafe. And so now we are looking at the opportunity to have the Gillis Suite playground completely renovated and hopefully a ribbon cutting sometime next August. This is not an ADA compliant equipment, but this is a picture of one of the units that would be on there for having students exercise outside and working on those gross motor skills of climbing, running, jumping, etc. But what we're most excited about is that this playground, and you can see it in the background of this plan, it doesn't look like much, but where the gray shading is, that's actually poured rubber that will allow for a ramp to be for students with disabilities that will be able to access part of the playground. You'll also see a ramp to this major play structure that has the castle on it. There's a ramp that will take students with disabilities that will be able to go right to the center of the equipment so that while their peers are playing, they can also feel like they are part of the action, which is something that has not been the case at the playground as it currently exists. So we're really excited to be able to include students in this important part of their day and their educational development, because we know how important play is to student development. Another important date that I'd like to put out there to mark your calendars is that the Fairview Park City School District, along with the City of Fairview Park, will be holding our annual State of the Community event. That is Thursday, May 1st, 2025, and we are very pleased to be hosting it again this year while the Gemini is under construction. We'll be doing it at the Fairview High School cafeteria, and this will also kick off the Innovation, Art, and Design showcase that we started last year and that we're happy to do again, so that students that attend, or excuse me, the community members that attend the State of the Community event will also have the opportunity to see the outstanding artwork, preschool through grade 12, that our students create with some of the tools that we have available to them in the Innovation Lab. So this is the part of the program where I pause for an opportunity that if you would like to submit questions through Facebook Live, you can do that while I go through the next portion of this presentation, which is to give you an update on athletics and activities. So get your questions fired up in the chat. So we are doing a wrap-up. John Adams came to the last board meeting to do a wrap-up of the fall sports, or excuse me, winter sports. So we're just going to go quickly through some of the highlights of that. Boys basketball, this year they were the CVC Metro champions for the second year in a row. Ryan Berry, the head coach of the varsity boys basketball team, was coach of the year. And the most valuable player for the team was Will Allen. So congratulations to the boys basketball team on yet another successful season. In bowling, we had Brian Weimels advance to the OHSAA district tournament. That's quite an accomplishment. So there he is pictured there. We're proud of Brian and his trip to the districts. Next, we have girls basketball. They had a successful season with a 5-win improvement and a first playoff win in years under new head coach Karen Swanson Hahn. So we're glad to have her on board. And again, the girls had an exciting season and showed much improvement over previous years. In swimming, 14 out of 14 swimmers hit at least one personal record at the OHSAA sectional swim meet. So we're again proud of our swimmers and looking forward to a day where we will have them back on our school property, or at least on the property of Fairview Park at the Gemini Center. Next, for wrestling, Nora Mooney, a female wrestler, qualified for the girls' state wrestling tournament. She was coached by our wrestling team. She's actually a student at Magnificat, but again, our coaches took her to qualify for the wrestling tournament. So we're very proud of her accomplishment. And in addition to that, 8 wrestlers qualified for the OHSAA district tournament. For track and field, on top of hosting the Warrior Relays this spring, Fairview will host the Chagrin Valley Conference 2-day championship track and field meet. So again, we're proud to show off our facilities to the community and to the CVC League. Next, we have baseball. Their numbers are at 22 participants in baseball, and they're going to try to have another JV team again this spring. Unfortunately, not such good news for girls softball. Unfortunately, the girls did not have the numbers this spring to have a high school team, and so we are working to build those numbers up through the middle school program so that we can have a successful varsity team next year. And then finally, just about activities that are happening. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, please make sure that you go onto our website and search for The Little Mermaid. The Fairview Stagecrafters and International Thespian Troupe 8671 will be engaged in a production of The Little Mermaid on Friday, March 28th at 7 p.m., Saturday, March 29th at 7 p.m., and the matinee on Sunday, March 30th at 2 p.m. So we hope you can join us for a fabulous night of music and our outstanding actors. So make sure you get that ticket. It's not to be missed, and bring the whole family. And with that, if there are no questions, we do have a question in the chat. So Mr. Rakovich will let me know what that question is.
So the question is, will the new cell phone policy extend to staff and faculty?
So I may not have put that slide in here, but certainly faculty and staff are expected, like we are with any sort of policy, to be appropriate role models for the policy. So staff will be allowed to have their cell phones, but we are expecting them to, during instructional times, obviously the model the behavior we want by not being on their phones. But there are legitimate reasons that staff members would need access to their phones. We use a technology called Raptor that we use to take attendance and to mark when we do emergency drills or to receive notifications about that. So they would have to have their cell phone on their person. And also, as we're looking at communicating better in the absence of students having direct communication with parents, we also want them to be responsive to their emails. So yes, it applies to them, but not in the same way that it would for students.
That's it.
That's the only question we had. Well, thanks again for joining us for this Superintendent Town Hall. The next one will be on May 5th, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much and have a great night.